This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh, look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream. On Sundays. Hope you're all doing well this morning. Happy New Year to you all. I hope it's a Happy New Year, even though it's already started out kind of on a downer note with Betty White passing away just 17 days before her 100th birthday. Although if you calculate in the leap years and all that, technically she made it to 100 years old. That's what people are saying now. I don't know why I'm dwelling on that. It was just kind of a sad thing. And everybody's talking about it, so rest in peace, Betty White. But that's not what we're here today. We're not here for RIP. We're here for DEI, which is so much better, I'm sure. Before I get into that, who is joining me on this chilly January morning? It's January now. Hell Triangle, Keyword AM, a Scanner Daffley, Tall Person, Mike R, Old Guy Gamer, Ryan R, Mike Savage. Good morning to you all. And if you'll take a look at the chat, if you happen to be watching now or in the future, I pinned up the link to Angry Illinoisians GoFundMe page. Angry has experienced a injury that he is having difficulty getting workers' compensation for. So if you can help out, anything is appreciated. So be on the lookout for that. And also shout out to Weebo Jones, who had a dog bite attack on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve or whatever. And she's now recuperating as far as I understand it, and all best wishes to her in healing up. So send your thoughts to her if you could on Twitter if you have not already. Golly gee whiz, with all that as preamble, what could we possibly get into today? Well, I thought we'd do something light in the sense that there's no visuals to this. It's a podcast. It's the Pivot podcast. Never heard of it before. Or the Diversity Pivot podcast. As many of you know, I have looked into and listened to several presentations on diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting practices over the years. And what is diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting practices as far as people going into companies and organizations and analyzing their situations for DEI? Well, I'm cynical enough to will it down to this. Somebody shows up to your company and tells you how racist your company is or how sexist your company is, and then says that they will be able to help you fix it. How do they know that your company is racist and or sexist? Demographics mostly, or anecdotal complaints from people or suspicions and so on. Most of them can take a look just at your workforce and just by looking at them know whether or not you have a problem. That's my very cynical analysis of the whole thing. It's kind of a scam. It really is kind of a scam. It's taking advantage of people's fear of being canceled as a company or lawsuits and thereof, and just exploiting that. And of course, there are many companies that are happy to be exploited in that way, because if they can have on their books a, very intentional, let's say, very authentic effort at imposing DEI practices on their company, it does serve as conceivably a little bit of liability insulation should anybody come to them in the future and say that they've been discriminated against in some way. And then they can point to these things and say, hey, wait, no, we went to a concerted effort not to be that way, so your argument is without merit. So it's kind of a weird symbiotic corruptive relationship as far as I can tell. Again, this is all my non-expert, non-professional analysis. So what's that all got to do with today? Well, I came across this presentation where a professional DEI consultant is apparently going to tell us that no one is a DEI expert. So if no one is a DEI expert, how exactly is she worthy of being paid to do what she does? I don't know. we're going to find out. So again, this is just a podcast. There's nothing visual to watch here unless you just like looking at the little gray circle around my avatar move as I talk. So for those of you that are driving along or just want to listen to something in the background, you're not going to be missing anything by just clicking off to another tab and having this play. So with all that being said, I'll start off with a few seconds for a sound test. Let me know if you can hear this. I didn't cut off or edit anything down, so there might be some chit chat at the beginning or other presentation stuff. If so, I'll try to skip past it. And let's go.
Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast.
Oh, it sounds so pleasant. You guys hear that okay? Does that come through all crystal clear? Oh, no recording noises on a stage in a TEDx presentation or anything. Arc 210, good morning. TC. Who else do I see here? Emperor, WR Costume, Spud Gun. And I think I got everybody. Sounds good, says Old Guy Gamer. Sounds good, Scribe, says Matt Barnes. All right. The Diversity Pivot Podcast.
I'm your host, Julie Kratz.
Hi, Julie.
This season, we're having sweaty conversations for...
What? No, wait, what? Wait. You're what?
Conversations for change.
Sweaty conversations for change? Okay.
We're talking with guests about uncomfortable conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh, uncomfortable conversations. Uncomfortable conversations that'll make you sweat. Oh, yeah. Uncomfortable conversations are my favorite.
Needed to pivot towards positive change.
Oh my God.
We do this podcast because it's important that all voices are heard.
Oh, good.
All people are seen.
Yes.
And all people feel a sense of belonging in their workplaces.
I'm glad to hear that because I'm one of people and I like to be seen and heard. Well, maybe not seen, but at least heard, my voice. Yes. So I'm glad you're inviting me to add my voice to the conversation, the uncomfortable conversation, the sweaty conversation.
Let's meet this week's guest.
Okay.
Joined today with Shilpa Fairwani, and she is an organizational psychologist by training and also the principal and CEO with IBIS Consulting Group, a leading diversity, inclusion, consulting and training firm.
A consulting and training firm that specializes in diversity and inclusion, but not equity? Uh-oh. Okay, so we have a educated professional D&I consultant. We're going back to the old days before they added the E to it. So D&I consultant. All right.
She has 2 decades of experience in the DEI space and partners with organizations to provide creative and bold diversity solutions. From pioneering diversity e-learning to using interactive theater for difficult conversations to developing a framework that assesses 14 organizational areas for bias, Shilpa has
14 organizational areas of bias. Wow. I mean, if I came into a company and said, I have this bingo card that I'm going to use as my guide to find all the different things that I can say indicate that there are biases in your company, I bet I could find several of the 14, depending on how abstract those things are. You know, we have no experience, do we, using a list of abstract concepts or words or terms to identify in various and random presentations and people, do we? No.
Been providing effective and sustainable solutions for organizations of all sizes.
Yay.
She partners with diversity committees, senior HR and business leaders. She's also delivered outcome-driven and systemic consultation to a variety of organizations.
Wow, that all sounds so impressive and completely nonsensical. I can't wait.
So excited to talk with you today, Shilpa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, real quick, over on the chat. Thank you, Matt Barnes. We're going to find out you're insane if you believe the best candidate for the job instead of diversity for reasons, aren't we? Yeah. I mean, I've said this before. I have a certain sort of sardonic respect for somebody who can leverage this kind of hustle given the environment right now and make a career out of it. It is very sardonic and cynical because I've joked several times that with as much time as I've spent watching, listening to, thinking about, deconstructing diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, consulting, theories, philosophy, and so on. I could hang out a shingle and call myself a DEI consultant and probably make some money somehow. I would hate myself for it, and I'd feel like an absolute scam artist because I would be, but I could do it because it really doesn't take anything. If you listen, and I have, to the people who practice this as their career, etc., there are people that are far less educated as far as like degrees and such as our speaker apparently has, that make a very, very good living being DEI consultants. It does not require any special training, as many of you know from listening to some of the experts we've looked at over the years. So yeah, I could conceivably make a good buck out of this, but I won't, because it's mostly nonsense and just, Salem witch hunting. But hey, what do I know? Lexi Mads is here. I guess I can start for sure now.
Excited about this too, and looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. Well, as we do all of our guests, we always like to start with the kind of the meat of the conversation. Tell us about your own personal experiences doing this work. I know you've experienced it professionally, but your own personal experiences with diversity and inclusion, and maybe times when things didn't go so smoothly.
Yeah, tell us your horror stories. Tell us how bad you've had it. Okay. Because, no one on the planet has had a bad work experience. It's very specific to specific people, I'm sure.
You will.
Yes. So, Julie, in terms of personal experience, let me share a little bit background and where I come from, because this will this kind of lay the foundation for me for even getting in this space. So I am originally from India, and I grew up as in a family with, I was one of 4 girls. And if you know a little bit about India, in terms of gender.
Okay, she's got some like dogs barking in the background or something. That's not me. Just and I can't take out any extraneous noises. But if it's annoying to you, it's annoying to me. But we'll just have to get through it.
Discrimination and how girls are treated versus boys or men and women.
Yes, India is a very different culture. It is a very different culture.
There is a lot of difference. So growing up in that society where every day you would go through conversations where what you can or cannot do as a girl, and not just that, even between the 4 of us, each one is different in terms of how we look, the skin tone, the color, color of the skin, and grew up facing a lot of colorism and people kind of saying, oh, if you're darker skinned, you're not as pretty, or so those are.
Well, hey, I just learned from an expert that if you wear a shirt with the chemical composition of melanin as the symbol on the shirt, you can fight colorism. I think.
Just some elements that were part of my day-to-day life. And again, when you get out of a culture like that, where I would see systemic oppression at different levels around me in the society, not just related to gender, but also related to caste and religion. And growing up, I did not, look at that as, okay, this is you're kind of fish in the water. It's part of the culture. But coming out of that country and kind of getting into the DEI space.
Wait, coming out of that country and getting into the DEI, that's a big jump. You went from being a child in India with 3 sisters and just getting out of that country into the DEI space. Okay. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Someone shut that goddamn dog up, Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp. Tombstone, probably my favorite Wyatt Earp movie. Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner, too long and drawn out. Although I did like the Doc Holliday in Wyatt Earp. Not in a different way, but I mean, Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday was, legendary. Dennis Quaid's Doc Holliday was pretty good too. But that movie doesn't get a lot of attention because it's long, drawn out, and self-indulgent, and Kevin Costner keeps trying to remake Dances with Wolves every time he made a movie back then. So anyway, that's just a side comment. You know what? I'm going to, just to not make it look like I'm here, I'm going to zoom that up a little bit. There we go. It looks more official. Okay, anyway, so you went from India, got out of that country, and now in the DEI space in one fell swoop. Okay.
Look at these conversations as something that's really important for us to have, because those biases, those stereotypes, assumptions get in the way of our day-to-day aspects. So, that's just a little bit about my background that will kind of tie into professionally where I am and why I'm doing this work. Okay, so from that background, you're ostensibly doing this work in order to counteract or go against the, let's just say, injustices you experienced as a child in India. Okay, that sounds fairly legitimate given the circumstances. I mean, at least in sentiment. We'll see how the execution goes.
Oh, so rich. And that word colorism sticks out to me.
Yeah, colorism sticks out to me too. It's still, I've heard it for years, but it seems to be all of a sudden being used more frequently. It's kind of odd.
Having thankfully a lot of partners and women of color in my network.
Oh, thankfully you've had a lot of partners and women of color in your network. Do they have names? Do any of their other attributes like, skills or knowledge or experience or merit mean anything? Just, oh, Lord.
Having that conversation, because that's just not something as a white woman I've ever had to consider,
You've never had to consider how you look. You've never had people judge you on the basis of your appearance. Really? You especially in the last 10, 15 years or so, you've never had anybody assess you on the basis of you being a white woman and what that purportedly means all by itself. Really? And by the way, her audio fading in and out there, again, that's the original recording. I can't do anything about that. So we'll all have to grin and bear it, I suppose.
This is such the standard that I've never been told, that I'm passing for something, for example, or never had trouble finding makeup or things that match my skin tone.
Oh my gosh, how very Peggy McIntosh, Invisible Knapsack. Oh no. Yeah, okay, boy.
Because unfortunately, white is kind of the default.
Oh yeah, white is the default. White is the default. Well, white is also the majority of the demographic population. So when you have people who are marketing products here, there, and otherwise, they're going to aim for the biggest audience at the most part. It's not so much racism as it is capitalism. And I know that's probably an evil word to a lot of people, but some forces are pushing these things that have nothing to do with a racial ideology, but rather profit, which is why I'll be curious to hear what our speaker has to say about her business.
So that's a source of privilege for me. But I'm reminded by how much we favor lighter skin, and how much we've seen people try to, lighten their skin even to fit in with that.
Yeah, that's why people go out and get tans all the time. Yeah.
Myth of that majority. So I'm curious.
The myth of that majority. Again, population demographics. It's just a matter of fact. It's not a matter of belief.
Yes, Shilpa, having had your diverse set of experiences, what are times when maybe well-intentioned, maybe not well-intentioned folks, when you've had those microaggressions or experiences of just not feeling maybe not feeling like you're in a place that's truly supportive?
Oh my gosh. Have you ever felt like someone was being mean to you? Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever taken a sidewise comment and decided to blow it up into something worse than it was? You ever feel bad? You ever feel out of place? You ever feel uncomfortable in a room full of people? Have you ever had that experience? Well, you might be a victim of microaggression if you decide to be.
Or, that feeling of belonging that's just so daunting
Mhm.
for all humans in the workplace, let alone folks of color. But
Yeah, it's especially worse for quote unquote folks of color. It's not just a human experience, like you said. You couldn't have stopped there. No.
just curious on your own personal experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Julie, being in this DEI space, I think we come across these kind of experiences on a daily basis, not just what we are seeing personally, but what we see with others, with our clients, kind of listening to stories that we come across during our workshops or training sessions. But generally, I would say, having moved as to this country about 25 plus years back, and now working as a CEO of a diversity company, what really comes across to
Wait a second. You immigrated here from another country. You're female. You're not white, and you're a CEO of a successful company. How is that possible? I'm told all the time that all of the glass ceilings, all of the intersectional discrimination that is present in this country would disallow this lady from doing anything at all, ever, forever. Huh. Okay.
me that some of these biases and assumptions I face in my day-to-day life as well. So, for example, I would go, and this happens a lot of times.
Okay, whatever she's about to say, guys, this happens a lot of times. All right.
Go to client meetings and you're accompanied by, let's say, a white male in this case. And I go into meetings where as soon as you step in with that white male, the assumption people make is that, I'm the one reporting to that person.
Well, have they ever met you before? Do they know who they're meeting when you walk in the room? How do you carry yourself? Do you step into the room first? What other information is there? In the absence of any information, I can make a lot of mistakes just based on assumptions. How do you introduce yourself? If they know you're going to be, if they know they're going to be meeting with you, have you not communicated with them ahead of time to say, hi, I am, and I'm going to be. Okay.
And it's when you kind of make the introductions and they see, okay, that I'm in the CEO role and that person is reporting to me. You just that expression, and you kind of come across these biases that people have that they don't even think about, but it comes across with any of these interactions.
Okay, well, how many times have you done it? I mean, obviously, you're pure, correct? You've never made that mistake, correct? Because you're so enlightened. And when you've not, I mean, you've never done that. Ever? Okay.
And I'll also add that, these kind of uncomfortable situations are not just at a personal level. When we have these conversations with clients, where that, yes, we want to meet the client where they are on their, on the diversity maturity level.
Meet the client where they are on the diversity maturity level. What does that mean?
But at the same time, it gets uncomfortable in terms of even helping these clients recognize that diversity is not, it's not like check the box, an activity or one program that they are talking about.
Yes, it is. It's checking a box. It's checking a demographic box. It's your company has too many or too few of this type of person, and we need to tell you that you do so you can change that. Or we need to go through these talks and things so everybody understands to be oversensitive and over-aware of everybody's skin color or genitals or whatever. That's exactly what it is. Unless you tell me something otherwise. Because almost all the activities, all the advice, all the consulting I see, if you whittle it all down, it comes down to making a company hyper-aware of the demographic makeup of its workforce in one way, shape, or form, and or becoming exceedingly sensitive to every single word, phrase, or gesture that is made one to another between certain demographics to certain other demographics. That's it. It's box checking and paranoia. Those are the two main goals and mechanisms of this work. Unless you tell me otherwise, I would love to hear otherwise.
To help them think about this more in a strategic way, where they are looking at this as a long-term journey. And some of this, discomfort around these conversations is so needed and essential, right? We want people to lean into that discomfort.
We want people to lean into that discomfort. We want to come in and make accusatory suggestions about everybody's morals and character and lean into that. And by lean into that, we mean acquiesce to the accusation, right? Do not lean back. Do not become defensive. Accept the accusation and push through it. Do not resist.
Without shutting down. So even as we have these conversations with clients around racial equity, you see that a lot of people are still not comfortable talking about things like privilege. And we all have that privilege in different ways, right?
Oh, we do? Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, why would somebody feel uncomfortable talking about privilege? If you come up to somebody and say, hey, because of the way you look, your successes aren't really that legitimate. And your failures or hardships really aren't that bad because of your privilege. I'm not coming in here and undercutting your personal achievements or watering down your personal tragedies. No. I'm just telling you what you already know, and that you have privilege. Why would anybody feel uncomfortable about that? Why would anybody get defensive about that? Someone coming in and telling you that your entire life experience is effectively delegitimized because of what you look like. Yeah, I can't imagine why someone would get defensive about that or feel uncomfortable.
But with some, you still hear clients or many people say things like, I'm colorblind, I don't see color.
And let me guess, you take that statement, that sentiment, that virtue literally, correct? That principle you do not see as a principle, you see it as a literal claim of fact. Okay.
And that's not true. That doesn't help with equity. Or
it doesn't? Really? Right? What, considering skin color an irrelevancy when assessing a person? Oh, okay. Well, how does keeping someone's color in mind help with equity?
Right now saying I treat everybody the same. I've worked hard. I've gotten it to this place because of this hard work, but people not recognizing that at a certain level, not every group has had that same platform to start from.
Not every group has had that same platform to start from. So I give you an argument as to how I, as an individual, have earned the things I have in life and wasn't handed anything particularly, or took advantage of the opportunities in front of me, whereas someone else might not have, or taken a risk that someone else might not have. But if I achieve a certain level of success for myself, I still need to feel like it's delegitimized because a group, i.e. demographic, that you say is inherently disadvantaged because they are part of that group / demographic has it worse. I need to feel bad. Right? Okay, good.
And those disparities, result in where we are today. So those are just some examples of where these conversations can get a little uncomfortable.
Can get a little uncomfortable. When your opening move is to tell someone that their personal situation, however bad or good that it is, actually isn't that good or legitimate or that bad or terrible as it is because of what they look like, because someone else in some abstract demographic you're talking about, you say has it worse off inherently. Yeah, gosh, how could those conversations possibly start out and become uncomfortable? I can't imagine. I really just can't imagine. And you do this for a living, making people feel bad for a living. Thank you, Gunfox61. People that their job is DEI will always find racism because if they don't, then companies will cut their job within a week because reasons. Well, that's it. I mean, let's just think about microaggressions for a second, okay? Every definition, every honest definition, such as it is, of microaggressions say, words or actions that are either intentional or oftentimes unintentional, et cetera, okay? So it's all about interpretation. Seeing a situation, hearing a word, whatever, looking at a policy, and deciding to put it through a DEI lens, which basically means, how can I skew this into a problem that I am here to solve and get a paycheck for? That's oftentimes the thing. And our speaker has already laid it out to us. She comes into a room full of people, and she can tell right off the bat, because of who's part of which group, who has privilege, who doesn't, and then who she needs to make to feel guilty for that privilege, which she knows that they have, and she can tell them that they have because of what they look like. Again, no matter how much they've achieved, no matter how much they've struggled, either one of those two things is completely irrelevant or watered down because of what they look like. And she knows it because of what they look like. Thank you, Mike R. It's a damn shame we're not using a bingo card for this one. I know, right? Yeah, the TEDx bingo card is sacred to TEDx, but yes, you can spot the similarities, right? I mean, it's easy now. I've after a fashion trained you to keep your ears open for when these things pop up, for when these concepts and these ideas arise, because they're very common tools, not just in DEI, etc., but in life in general, right? So just when someone's trying to manipulate you, someone's trying to edge their way into your sympathy or psyche, or try to use high-minded terms without actually explaining anything, yeah, you can recognize it more freely, I think, these days.
Whereas I said, that discomfort is often needed to even go deeper and be meaningful around these conversations.
That reminds me of sorry for keep pausing, but making someone feel uncomfortable is necessary in order to go deeper into these conversations. There's a great movie. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. It's called The Master. Philip Seymour Hoffman, Joaquin Phoenix. It's a movie that is a very thinly veiled deconstruction of Scientology. And there's this excellent scene between Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix, where Philip Seymour Hoffman is, let's just say, auditing Joaquin Phoenix early on in the movie. And you see how you start off by making someone uncomfortable, making them feel accused of something, but yet holding them to account to sit there and take it because it's needed. It's necessary. This is how we get through those barriers. This is how we get past that bias, by acknowledging it, by bringing that harm to the forefront, by bringing that pain before you so you can face it and conquer it. It's the same method of psychological manipulation. So just, if you haven't seen that movie, I mean, even aside from the themes therein, it's a really good movie. Let's see. Hell Triangle, thank you so much. I wish I had Robin DiAngelo's job. All whites are racist. That'll be $12,000, please. No kidding. Like I say, not a big fan of her on a sort of moral, ethical level, but I gotta respect the hustle to a certain extent. People are willing to throw money at that lady to tell them how racist white people are. It's an amazing gig. It really is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you hit on so many things.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
One, the P word. Privilege is hard to admit.
Yeah, privilege is hard to admit. Yeah. Yeah, tell us all about your privilege, Julie. Tell us how wherever you are in life, your career, your education, all of it is illegitimate. Tell us. I mean, it obviously is, right? Because of the way that you look.
Yeah.
And as we have to say, chance to be helpful to others, chance to leverage it for good.
Leverage it for good. Yes, you have this flaw. Now I need to have you use your flaw for good.
The whole, I treat everyone equally, right? I don't see color, like this myth of meritocracy.
Wow, the myth of meritocracy. I don't see. Boy, you're throwing out all of the things that could possibly lead to actual equity or egalitarianism, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't see color. That's nonsense. We have to see color. We have to. Right? There is no meritocracy. Nobody gets to where they're going under their own volition. They just don't. Yeah. Okay. So again, tell us how your entire career, Julie, is illegitimate. Tell us how you're even being here hosting this podcast is a farce.
The color blindness narrative that we've all unfortunately been taught. And
the I have a dream speech is the colorblind narrative. Unfortunately, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put forth the colorblind narrative in his I Have a Dream speech. It's a real unfortunate circumstance to have had that happen. Gosh, man, one of the worst events in our country's history, the sentiments put forward in Martin Luther King's speech. Yeah, it's terrible. You're right, Julie. It's an unfortunate narrative. Thanks for that.
At the crux of that, that's such a huge problem because you can't solve a problem you're not aware of. And so we're kind of ignoring that this is a problem or that people aren't treated equitably, even if they're treated quote unquote equally.
What? I don't know, Julie, what's the difference? You tell me.
And Shelby, I know you do this work for a living. So share with us the hard conversations you're having with your corporate clients and your clients that might be well-intentioned to focus on DEI. I mean, a lot of organizations are, but there's still this stumble and bumble. There's still a lot of people that aren't getting it right. So tell us where the conversation is now.
Yes.
Tell me.
World. So, Julie, as you said, yes, a lot of times these are clients, corporations, individuals that are really well-intentioned. But what I'm really seeing in the corporate world, the conversation around DEI is evolving. In a lot of times, or even in the past, I would say 5 to 6, 7 years, the focus was more on unconscious bias.
Yes, unconscious bias, implicit bias, microaggressions and so on. That has been the sort of the edge of the wedge in getting into these conversations. You tell someone everybody has biases, which is a true statement. You can't get past that one, right? So you start off with a piece of truth. And then you say, and then there was those unconscious biases which cause you unknowingly, unwittingly, even if you are well-intentioned, to devalue some people over others, value others over others because of this, that, and the other. And I'm going to tell you what your unconscious biases are. And I can tell you what your unconscious biases are because here's the demographics of your workforce. Obviously, because there's more of this type of person than that type of person, there's an unconscious bias in this company. And we have to solve it.
And how we all have these biases, and it's more at the unconscious level. I do see there is that a change in terms of how people are thinking about, okay, how do we go deeper into conversations that actually do look at some of the systemic aspects of DEI?
Okay, I'm dying to know. Because aside from just the high-level accusations, tell us about the systemic unconscious biases that take place. Give us some examples. I would love examples. I always ask for examples. Give me some.
And even to the point where there are many corporations that are looking at racial equity conversations, understanding or trying to understand what's the difference between equality versus equity.
Oh, no, it's very simple. Equity is equality of outcome. Equality is equality of opportunity. Right? One allows people to rise or fall on their own merits. The other one mechanically determines everyone's equal outcome regardless of their ability or skill. That's the difference. It's very, very simple, actually.
And so, it is, the conversations are getting to a point where, as you said, the P word, without kind of leaning into that area and opening up the conversation around how that kind of power and privilege gets in the way of equitable opportunities for all, I'm seeing that happen more and more.
No, not equitable opportunities for all. Now you're mixing up your own terms. Okay. The difference between equality and equity. And I'm just talking, I'm not talking about the dictionary definitions here, okay, for everybody's edification. I'm talking about how these terms are used and how they are defined by action these days. This is like slang. This is like corporate DEI woke slang. This is not about dictionary definitions. When someone's talking about equality, they're talking about an uncertain outcome. They're talking about an equality of opportunity, and that is to be avoided. Equality is not good in this area because that means that there's a risk. That means that someone could fail, legitimately fail. Right? We don't want equality of opportunity because there's uncertainty there. What we want is equity. We want equality of outcome where there is no risk. There is no challenge. There is no possibility that I'm going to fail or anyone is going to fail. That is the difference. Okay. And so I just want to underscore the fact that I'm not talking about dictionary definitions of those two words. I'm talking about what they actually mean in the context of these conversations. That's what it means. And she's already mixing up her terms.
And people wanting to talk about that. The other piece I would say with the corporate clients that we are working with, there is also the understanding, or at least with many of them, the understanding that training in itself is not going to move the needle for you.
Okay, well, as with everything else, I'd need to know exactly what do you mean move the needle? Where are you starting from and what is the goal? And how are these activities or this consulting supposed to move from point A to point B? I mean, we need some context. Like, give it, I would hope, and well, it's a thin hope. I would hope that after all of our speakers' experience, she could give us a hypothetical situation, a construct company that she comes into where they are at stage A and she's going to move them to stage C where they are more equitable than where they started. And here's how what I do leads them there. That is what I want to hear. I don't want to hear all this, high level, fluffy, indistinct stuff. I want to hear an actual example of process, even if it's hypothetical. I don't need a corporate name or anything, but she should have some active examples at this point to give us to illustrate what she's talking about. My fingers are crossed.
So yes, we need to have these conversations, but we also need to think about this at a strategic and systemic level. How are your policies, practices, procedures being impacted by bias that may be built in? Mm-hmm. So I often tell my clients that yes, it's good that we are having these difficult conversations, and that will help raise individual awareness.
What is a difficult conversation? Sketch out for us a difficult conversation. You sit down with your corporate client, the CEO, the marketing executive, the sales, whatever. What is that initial conversation? How does that play out? What questions are you asking them? What information are you looking for? Please.
Around these topics, but at the same time, you have to step back and start looking at what can be done at the systemic level around diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, you explained absolutely zero. Okay, you've got another 20 minutes left in this thing. I hope we get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, individuals to systems. I think it's really tempting for organizations to want to fix individuals and be like, oh, we'll just do training. We'll teach people how to be inclusive. We'll talk about bias and how to manage microaggressions.
Okay, well, if that's all nonsense and useless, give me an example of altering the system in a company towards better equity. Give me an example. Just one active example.
And unfortunately, over the last couple of years, that conversation shifted to people realizing, maybe it's our culture. Maybe it's the employee experience from hiring to separation. There's a whole lot of stuff that we do prescribe and enforce and don't always do so great with.
Okay, who's being interviewed here? Are you interviewing yourself, or are you asking the expert for her input? Good Lord.
Those systems. So taking a look under the hood and looking at the systems that may hold people back.
Like what system? Give me an example of a system, please.
May promote others that tend to be of the majority group.
Promote others who tend to be of the majority group. Okay, so if you have a majority, quote unquote, group in your company, and there are positions to be filled and promoted to, what are the odds that someone from the quote unquote majority group is going to be promoted? Are the odds better or worse than a group in the company that is of a smaller number? What? Is it racism or sexism, or is it just the reality of the numbers? And if it's the reality of the numbers, is it possible that you could be looking for witches where there are none? Seriously.
But Shilpa, I know you do something really interesting in your work. You do theater and teach people through real life role play and action. And I'm sure you use a bunch of different words than the ones I'm using. But tell us about how you approach this so differently than I think kind of your regular DEI off the shelf training.
Okay. Maybe my prayers are being answered here. Are we going to actually get a description of what she does in her consulting? Role playing? Oh, I can't wait for this.
Yeah. So Julie, interactive theater is one of our most popular and powerful modalities.
Interactive theater. Okay, so you take two people from the company, you give them a situation to play out in some over-the-top way as an example of things that people do to each other. Oh, I've never heard of this before.
To open up the dialogue on different DEI topics. And the way we work with that is we script these scenarios for different clients.
Okay, so you make stuff up ahead of time that isn't necessarily real. Okay.
Based on their real life opportunities and challenges.
Based on their real life opportunities and challenges. Okay, how does that work?
So often to really show them that this is your reality, this is the kind of challenges that people are facing.
Wait. You go into a company and you script something based on their reality and challenges, and you tell them this is the way things are. So you have a hyper fiction that you're telling people this is the way the world works for you. What?
And there's something about the modality where people do feel comfortable asking actors all kinds of questions that they would not with their peers. So often the way it works is one.
Whoa. You're bringing in the actors yourself? So wait, so I just want to make sure I understand this. You're putting on a stage play of hired actors at a corporate client's offices or something to enact what you say is reality. Okay.
Once a scenario is performed, these actors stay in character and the participants get to ask them questions.
So the audience gets to ask questions of people portraying characters in a situation that you have scripted ahead of time. Okay.
And they would answer these questions in character. But a lot of the learning happens around that exchange, because that's when you get to see what's the impact of these conversations? What are people feeling? How does this impact their sense of belonging? What could they have done differently? So it gives them a safe space, as at the same time a brave space to say, okay, let's lean into that conversation and ask the kinds of questions that will help us understand what's our role in doing things differently.
Okay, so you craft a narrative and you hire actors who are scripted and instructed to behave a particular way, to answer questions in a particular way, to have a little backstory for themselves that they're going to play off of as they interact with the corporate clients, to direct the conversations and the conclusions in the way that you have scripted them before even getting to that place. So let me ask you something. Is that a conversation or is that a lecture? I mean, if you're running the table on the one side of the conversation, you know and have directed what the answers are going to be, no matter who asks what. Is that a conversation or is that a lecture?
And, around this, there's definitely facilitated dialogue and conversations, but those scenarios become the foundation of for many of the organizations to say, where do we go next?
No. Okay, tell me about the facilitated conversations and discussions. I don't care about your pre-scripted, pre-packaged, canned stage play. All right, that means nothing. It's talking down to people, quite literally, if they're up on a stage. Tell me about the actual conversations. What happens with the actual people that work for your corporate clients? How do those interactions go? This is insane. So, well, it's not insane. I mean, I see the utility of it. It's one long, drawn out accusation used through a stage play, but that's not what I want to know about.
What changes can we make? What does this mean in terms of my role as a diversity ally or advocate?
A diversity ally or advocate? What's the difference? I assume we're never going to find out, but all these terms being thrown around, I am just endlessly curious to know what these things mean.
So, having done DEI work for so long, I feel there are different ways in which the dialogue can be we can approach this dialogue.
I would love to hear how you approach this dialogue. Thank you, Hell Triangle. These two women are the exact reason I'm going to trade school. Less gender diversity. It's got nothing to do with what the people are. It's the ideology, the ideas they're putting forward, and how they're holding other people to account for things they may never have done, but they assume that they are because of what they look like. And yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been very lucky so far. My company that I work for is so small that we have had maybe one or two such meetings about subjects that get close to this kind of stuff. And I've been there for, almost 15 years now or something. It almost never comes up. It's just a non-issue. But I've heard stories from my family members and from many of you who have emailed me sidewise to give me information on what your company's doing or what this other company you work with is doing and that kind of thing. And I don't know what I would do if I ended up in a company where they push this stuff forward. Knowing what I know, having gone through and listened to so much of this stuff as I have, I mean, I am kind of curious to find out, like, if I was confronted with this stuff as part of my job, how would I react? How would I manage that? Right? Would I just not work for companies that ever had these things? Could I avoid it? Like I said, I've been very fortunate so far that I haven't had to come up against that conflict, but I know at some point the day is coming. And so, anyway.
But interactive theater provides that opportunity for people to see some real life scenarios.
No. To see some scripted scenarios. Scripted and curated scenarios where you control everything about the conversation and the interaction thereafter. Tell me about the in-person, quote unquote, dialogues or facilitated conversations. Tell me about those, not your pre-packaged drama bomb.
Themselves represented in those scenarios,
No.
and then kind of start thinking about what they can do differently in their role.
Okay, so it's an accusation, right? Without actually talking to the individuals in the company, your stage play is an accusation of how people should behave or assume to behave. Ugh.
I love that.
Of course you do.
Interaction. I'm a big believer that people can't sit, well, I don't think they ever could, but sit in front of a computer screen nowadays and just absorb information and miraculously change. I think we're looking for real inclusive behavior change. People have to interact with the content. They have to find ways, excuse me, to apply to their own world.
Yeah, behavioral modification. Yeah, okay. Apply to our own world. Okay, like how?
Their own lives, and they have to know, call them talk tracks of things that I can say to signal I want to be inclusive versus things I might steer clear of because they could be harmful or they could be unintended microaggressions.
Unintended microaggressions. I would love to ask our speakers, who is immune from either committing or encountering unintended microaggressions? All right? Because the answer is no one. Because it's 99% personal interpretation and assumption of motive or action on the other person's part. That will keep people like our speaker in business forever.
Towards an underrepresented group. I'm curious, Shilpa, as we are approaching 2022.
What about an overrepresented group? What about saying privilege? I mean, is that a microaggression? Is that just an active aggression where you're making an accusation of someone's value, worth, talent, skill, hardship? It's got nothing to do with an underrepresented group, especially if you mean it.
And knowing all the challenges that still exist in our workplaces around inclusion. And I think a growing concern from underrepresented groups. I think a growing, rightfully so, impatience and frustration with the lack of real change.
Give us a baseline from which you are seeking to make changes from. You have to describe to us the specific problems, the outcomes you are looking for, and how your processes or initiatives or activities are meant to lead people there. Stop talking in abstractions. I know I'm screaming into the ether. I've done this many times before, but when you're listening to something that is supposed to present us with information and details, that's supposed to educate us on something, and I'm constantly not being told things I need to know, I get frustrated. I get very impatient.
What are you seeing on the radar? If you could pull out a crystal ball and tell us what organizations should be focused on into the next year, what's top of mind for you and your clients?
Okay. Are we going to get a specific? An example?
Yes. In terms of, there are things where I wish this is where it would be, and then the reality where individuals or clients generally are with this work. But I will say that, my hope is that 2022 and beyond, anybody who is looking at doing DEI work, either at the individual or organizational team level, they are looking at this more as an ongoing journey and not something where, yes, there can be some quick wins, but it's not, there are no magic bullets so I just.
Basically what I'm saying is my services are going to be needed forever. There is no solution. There is no endpoint. There's no stage at which these problems are solved. It will always be a problem, and I will always need a paycheck.
Just hope that 2022, with everything that we have gone through in the recent years around DEI, not just here in this country, but also at the global level, that we do take this as an opportunity to say, this is ongoing work. It is hard work where we will need this momentum throughout.
I need to be perpetually employed. The problem will never be solved. It is difficult work, and in order to make it even slightly easier, you need to hire me to help you. That's all I'm hearing here. That's all I'm hearing here. It's just Gunfox61, thanks so much. Scribe, I hope they get to the point already, because all I hear is blah, 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 et cetera, but they never get to the point. Well, okay. Here's the joke, such as it is. Them never getting to the point is the point, right? I mean, if they never give us specific examples, if they never say, here's the starting line and here's the end line, that is the point. I mean, I come into these things with, like I say, kind of a cynical expectation of what I'm going to hear. Right? I want to be surprised. I want to be proven wrong. I want to learn something. I want to have my mind changed. I want somebody to come on here, or I bring somebody on here, I should say, who purports themselves and comports themselves to be a DEI expert who has a, here's where we start, here's what we do, and here's where we end. Right? Otherwise, it's all just a faith-based system. Original sin never goes away. Right? Giving penance for the wretched creature that you are is a forever experiment. That's what we end up hearing. So I listen to these various experts and consultants and everything because I want to hear something I haven't heard. But every time that I listen and I hear nothing but placating, abstracts, or it's an endless journey, it just goes to continually prove that this is a pile of nonsense. But I don't know it until I listen to it. And that's the thing. That's one of the things I try to get across on my channel is that, I can listen to one speaker on a subject and just say, okay, well, that's the end all be all and move aside, right? I can listen to one person tell me about restorative justice and take their interpretation as gospel. That's all there is to say. And I'm done with it. I don't want to fall into that trap if I can help it, right? Because there's always the possibility that someone's going to come along and change my mind. Or tell me something I hadn't heard before. I'll at least come away knowing something more about a subject than I did because I've listened to more than one person talk about it. And that's, them not getting to the point here for the sake of this, for the sake of these individuals and their business is the point. So I know it sounds counterintuitive. I know it sounds completely masochistic and or sadistic, but that's what I'm trying to get out of it, sort of, kind of, I guess.
And then the other piece that we've been talking about also is that this work cannot be done in just one area or one part of the organization.
Yeah, no, we need you to take us into all parts of your organization, especially if you're a multinational. Fly us to all of your offices, and we'll need, airfare and a paycheck for each one of these stops. Yeah, no, like I say, I don't expect answers, right? But I have to have a certain level of respect for the hustle. I really do. Because again, ultimately, what our speaker here and what so many I've looked at before are doing, it may be ultimately a scam. It may be a scam of guilt tripping, a scam of I know better than you, a scam of we're going to help, massage your organization's appearance to the outside world and perhaps insulate you from any liability claims of discrimination and so on. But people are willing to pay for this. There would not be a market for this if people weren't willing to pay for it, right? Something's only worth as much as someone's willing to pay you for it. And in that regard, I can't blame them for going to where the money is, right? It's cynical, it's wholly capitalistic, but it's the way the world works. And as long as companies are willing to dole out tons of money to people to tell them how racist they are, and then give them the sense that they're doing something about it for the sake of PR or their own sense of self-consciousness, it'll keep going.
But it really needs to be more holistic.
Holistic. You hear that all the time, a holistic solution. What does that mean?
You're looking at embedding DEI in every aspect of the organization.
Yes.
So it has to be part of that foundation.
Basically, hire us as an employee that we don't actually work for you. We are a constant contract. Constant contract. We are your add-on executive team that doesn't actually work for you, but we'll keep getting a paycheck as advisors.
And again, that's hard work, that's long-term work. And the other word that kind of sometimes scares people off around DEI is the whole aspect of accountability.
Yes, accountability. Exactly what does that look like? What is it you're holding people to account for, and how are they held accountable for these things, especially when it comes down to racism and sexism and accusations of discrimination? You know, when you've cornered somebody into being subject to that in a company, how do you hold someone accountable once you've painted them with that giant scarlet letter?
Right? How will we hold ourselves accountable? How will we hold others accountable?
Yes,
how are we going to hold organizations accountable?
How?
So the more we can start 2022 with the focus on, yes, we are doing all of this, but at the end of the day, if there is no accountability, there will be no real change. That
I agree. If you let somebody run roughshod over, quote unquote, the rules without any consequences, there will be no change. All right. So what are the rules and what are the consequences? Just give me one example. You've done this work for what, 20 years or something, you said. Okay. In 20 years, there is not one common situation, organizational initiative or structure that you've come across that is so just ubiquitous that you're not going to be giving anything away about any particular client by talking about it. There's got to be at least one common factor that you can speak on as to, here's a common problem, here's how my consulting firm addresses this problem, and this is how we hold people accountable. I just want to hear one.
We are looking at. So I would say those are some things. And, other than that, what we've already talked about, that, keep the focus on individual and systems, have more meaningful conversations, go deeper into aspects where it's not just at the level of awareness, but you're really going deeper in conversations around race, gender, sexual orientation, disability.
How do those conversations work? Just tell me, how do you approach that in a company? Right? What is the opening move in a sit down with the people who work at a company or with the leadership? What does that look like? How do you start? Anything?
Yes, it is about inclusion, but at the same time, it's a different mindset when you start thinking about, what can we each do to make this a more equitable world, society, workplace.
Are you trying to save the world? And what do you mean by equitable? I mean, again, I'm imposing my understanding of those words onto this conversation because you haven't told me otherwise. I'm taking what I have distilled from dozens and dozens of presentations like this. But I'm only assuming because you're not saying. And that's one of the problems with this kind of deal, is that they never specify. They rarely ever define their terms, and they rarely, if ever, describe their practices. The fact that she actually detailed her stage play deal is actually, I'll give her this. That is a rare thing. I don't think I've ever heard somebody break down that activity or even described that activity in that amount of detail before as part of their consulting practices. So in that regard, kudos. I hadn't heard anything laid out like that before. So I'll take that. It implies a whole heck of a lot, as I've already stated, but I would like to know more about the actual person-to-person, consultant to client interactions that it had in doing, quote unquote, this work. I almost never hear that stuff. I want to hear it.
So that will be a different kind of skill set needed for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love so much of what you just said.
Love what? She said nothing. Oh gosh, these just yes men, sycophantic, nod and smile hosts on things. No pushback, no questions, no follow-ups. Anything that someone says is just gold. Rumpelstiltskin and the straw comes out gold no matter what I do. Come on.
Accountability. Absolutely agree. More depth beyond just race and gender, and broadening that definition to be more holistic of all the dimensions.
All dimensions. All dimensions? Well, you can talk about like tall or short. You can talk about like big toe, little toe, like all dimensions.
Diversity. And I love both of those because I think both of those bring in the majority group that is most needed. Is
the majority group. Just say it, lady. Just the majority group. Why are you hedging yourself around what you want to? Just say it. Just let us know that you're racist or you're sexist, right? Just say it. The majority group. It's like a verbal Streisand effect, isn't it? Every time she says that, you know exactly what it is she's talking about, and just makes her sound worse for it.
Conversation, our white male colleagues that, might just not feel that they're diverse enough to be talking about this or don't feel included.
In the chat, Star Saver says, I'm sure word salad has already been circled. Well, in the abstract, yes. The bingo card is used only for TED Excellence because it's very specific to that. But obviously, those, as I said earlier, those terms, those concepts, those phrases, and so on, you can keep your ears open for them in anything these days. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything with social justice or DEI or whatever. If someone starts implying meaning or intent in someone in a conversation, well, there's mind reading, assumes motives, right? You can spot these things in everyday situations, in the news and politics and elsewise. It's not just about this kind of subject matter. It's about life in general. And I'm a little gratified, although obviously a little apologetic at the same time, that in just listening to this, I see so many people in the chat like yelling out bingo squares because you're recognizing this stuff when it happens. And that's good. You should know when someone's trying to gloss over something or manipulate you or not say enough about something or say too much about nothing. It's useful. It's not always fun. Can sometimes be kind of depressing, but it's useful.
I do think we've always risked a potential alienation of that group that despite our best efforts,
do you think you risk an alienation of the majority group despite your best efforts? Well, again, I can only assume who you're talking about when you say the majority group. Do you risk alienating them when you say like, oh yeah, do you know that you possess privilege in all things no matter what? Do you know that your successes really aren't earned successes? Do you know that all of your struggles really aren't that bad of struggles? Yeah, how could you risk alienating anybody by starting off a conversation like that, I wonder?
The word inclusion is meant to include everyone.
Everyone, even the majority group. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Especially that group.
That group. Lady, you are doing yourself no favors in constantly couching your language. Say what you mean. We all know what you mean. It makes you look ridiculous the more that you don't.
But so often I'm hearing from my clients, like we're getting some pushback. We're getting that group is feeling like they don't matter. That's absolutely not the case. So
that group, the majority group, they don't matter. Well, you won't even address them directly, right? You won't even say the truth of what you're talking about. How could anybody take you seriously? How could anybody feel that you're a credible person if you're not willing, and pointedly not willing, to say what you mean? Why are you avoiding saying what you mean? And likewise, in how many other instances are you not saying what you mean? You see the fine line about credibility, about believability? Okay? If you're willing to not say what you're talking about in this instance, how many other situations where you are nervous to be specific are you avoiding detail? That's all you're doing here.
So I'm wondering, Shilpa, if you run into that in your business or get that feedback, and what you might offer to listeners that might be wrestling with that.
Okay. And I know I'm pausing and pausing and pausing. Is it possible that the pushback you're getting from that group has merit? Have you considered the possibility that pushback you are seeing consistently from the majority group has any merit? Or are you automatically dismissing such concerns because they are of the majority group? And if you are dismissing such concerns or thoughts or voices on the basis of their, I don't know what you want to call it, membership in the majority group, what does that say about you?
Yeah, absolutely, Julie. I think, as you said, inclusion is about everyone. And yes, we sometimes hear with this work that, white men feeling that this is reverse discrimination now.
No. It's not. There's no such thing as reverse discrimination. It's just discrimination. And at least our speaker said what our host will not say, right? The majority group, white men. That's it. Okay. So I'm curious to find out, do you take any of that pushback seriously, or is it all dismissed?
Now we are being left out of the conversation, and that's not the not how DEI work should be done.
Are you sure about that? Because our host is not even willing to say it's like they're Voldemort or something. She isn't willing to even acknowledge their existence in specificity. She is so scared to say it. Why?
I also feel that, for everybody to understand that DEI is not an us versus them situation.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You are constantly pitting each other against one another. Both of you have gone on now to tell us about privilege. Okay, you're setting up an us versus them situation. You're saying that some people are more inherently advantaged than other people. And so the one group has to feel sorry for the other group. And the second group needs to hold the first group accountable for their inherent privilege because of what they look like, one to another, group to group. That is exactly what you're doing. That is your bread and butter. Come on.
For inclusion to really work, for belonging to work, yes, the overall culture and environment has to be looked at in a way that everybody, and by everybody it is like all groups, do feel included.
Demographics. It makes me cringe inside every time someone who purports to be a professional expert, whatever in a field, starts conflating groups and demographics.
And the other piece around DEI work, where I feel it's, again, going back to the us versus them, but also the mentality of abundance versus scarcity, because I feel sometimes people feel if the other group is getting something, that means it's less for us.
Why would they think that when you talk about privilege, when you talk about advantages, when you talk about equality versus equity? Why would they possibly think that? Are you being serious right now?
Right. So that even kind of using that mentality of abundance, that, it's not a zero-sum game. We are looking at groups that may have traditionally been marginalized.
Demographics.
And yes, what can we do to provide an equal playing field? But then that's an equal playing field for everyone.
Okay. How?
So that does sometimes needs a little bit of stepping back to really think about this in a way that it is.
Yeah, it is what now? What are we talking about again?
It is going to provide an opportunity to groups that have over time been marginalized.
Groups. How will you do that? What groups are inherently disadvantaged? Tell me.
But at the same time, the focus definitely is on inclusion as well. So,
but how is it focused on inclusion when you're talking about disadvantaged groups? If you're talking about disadvantaged groups who have been classically marginalized, that means that there are groups that are not classically marginalized. So there are groups that need help, and there are groups that don't need as much help, right? Okay, and this isn't a us versus them. It's not pitting people against each other. It's about inclusion, except that you have to put a spotlight on specific people, not groups. You have to put a spotlight on specific people, individuals in these companies and organizations, because based on what they look like, that they need special help. Are you listening to yourself right now? Thank you, Poker Pierce. Happy New Year, Scribe and Chat. Happy New Year, Poker Pierce. Hope you and yours are safe and well. Yeah, tell me about inclusion again, and then tell me how you're portioning everybody off on the basis of what quote-unquote group they fall into. How is that inclusive? What are you talking about?
So it's not a us versus them kind of.
You just laid out an us versus them scenario that you're imposing by assuming an inherent deficiency in certain groups versus other groups, and that those first groups need special help, attention, and care because they have historically been XYZ PDQ. But this isn't an us versus them. Oh, by the way, let me tell you about privilege. You don't know what you're talking about, do you? You have absolutely no idea what it is that you're talking about. That's the only conclusion I can come to.
I think that's going to work in this case.
No, it's not a zero-sum game.
What?
It's not an us versus them.
You keep telling yourself that. If you tell yourself that often enough, maybe you'll start to believe it. Methinks thou doth protest too much.
There's so much paradox, I think, in this conversation too. There's so much room for the both and. The yes, I'm a white male and I care about diversity.
Oh, you finally said it. Oh, the majority group. But oh my gosh, was that tough? Was that difficult? Did you need her to say it first before you felt comfortable doing it? Is that what happened? Now that your guest said it, you feel safe in doing it?
If only we could say, if only those two things could be seen together more often.
Exactly.
And
oh yeah, being a white male and being for inclusion. Gosh, if only those things could be seen together, more often. Because obviously, if you see a white male, you can be pretty well assured that they're against inclusion, that they're actually inherently racist and sexist. But this isn't about an us versus them. No. This is about inclusion. It's not about making assessments of people on the basis of their skin color or their gender and knowing what they think and how they act and behave towards others. No.
Yeah.
together more often. there's just a perceived big risk of saying you're doing the wrong thing, or, the stumble and bumble, we call it.
The stumble and bumble. You mean accusations without evidence, assessments based on arbitrary factors of one's makeup, that kind of stumble and bumble? That sounds so cute when you put it that way.
That allies go through, myself included. I make mistakes all too often on a regular basis.
We all do, right?
We all do.
That's it doesn't, I often say that even the term diversity expert, is there anybody who's an expert in DEI, right?
You're right. Who is there an expert in DEI? Am I pulling a paycheck over absolute nonsense?
We all make our mistakes. We are all learning, but to look at this in a way that helps the agenda around diversity and inclusion move forward.
How? What is the agenda?
That's what's needed.
Oh, Shilpa, I love that. No one is an expert. And I joke with people.
No one is an expert. We are such frauds. We are such frauds. We get paid to do this, and we know it's nonsense. We can laugh about how no one knows what they're doing in this business, but we still expect a paycheck for what we do. I don't know that I need to go any further with that. I mean, I kind of knew from the title that's where we were going, but and we're up at the hour and a half mark, and I don't really feel like going through much else, because if after 24 minutes of a 35-minute presentation, this is their opening and best gambit so far in conversation, I can only assume, and I am assuming, that's only going to get worse from here. So I think I'm going to call it here. If there is some clamor from my beloved audience to hear more from these two, maybe I'll follow up next week. I don't know. That's up to you, I guess. I will be effectively on the fence about it, but I'm leaning towards I'm done. I'll take a couple of minutes here for any other comments or questions you guys might have, and then we'll wrap things up. Keeverdam says 3.5 minutes away from the hour and a half mark. LOL. Yeah, well, if I wasn't my own timekeeper, Keeverdam would keep me on track as well. Let's see. Gwynplaine or Gwynplaine. This whole ideology is counterproductive. They create division. Yeah, I mean, division is their bread and butter. They need to divide. They need to say, this demographic of people is this way, and this demographic of people is that way, and this demographic needs help, obviously, because they are inherent victims, and this demographic over here needs to do the helping because they have more help to give, because obviously they are more advantaged. Yeah, the us versus them, creating conflict, inciting conflict, that's how this works, right? If you get a rise out of someone, you can point to that and say, aha, well, here's where your bias is kicking in, and that's why I'm here to help you. Let's see. Zan Wild, these people are all crazy. Now, here's the thing, and I not to be just contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, they're not crazy. They're not crazy. On the one hand, they're taking advantage of a situation where there is so much fear, paranoia, and virtue signaling going on that it is a prime market, okay? But the other part of it is, it's sort of a self-reinforcing situation. Unless you go into this being an absolute total, I know I'm a con man, okay? You could be forgiven to a certain extent from being led to believe that what you're doing is correct, right? Because there's nothing but positive reinforcement to this industry, not only in the money and the attention, but also in the fact that you have so many people willing and able and excited to nod, smile, and believe everything you say, right? So you could be forgiven for being fooled by your own audience and buying your own press. They're not crazy. Do not dismiss them as insane, okay? They've gotten away with it this long on this kind of rhetoric and this kind of content that it sounds perfectly reasonable. That's part of the thing you have to keep in mind. Okay. I don't think that our speakers here are stupid. I don't think that they're insane. I think they have fallen into a ideological trap, an echo chamber that self-reinforces and also has the advantage of being a paying career. That's what we're seeing most of the time. Now, sure, there are people out there who are 100% aware of the fact that they are playing a grift and make no bones about it if you listen to them for 10 minutes. But there are a lot of people out there who are, in all honesty, true believers in this and are simply, by their own decisions and just by fate, taking advantage of other people's paranoia and believing their own press. I cannot tell you that there is a trick to distinguish one from the other, right? It's just one of those things. It's kind of like, pornography. You can't necessarily describe it, but you know it when you see it. But I don't think our speakers here are crazy. I don't think that they're inherently criminal or something, but I think they're taking advantage of other people's paranoia and putting in a lot of gobbledygook to make it sound like it's academic when it's really just old school divide and conquer. That's all it is. But you can fool yourself into thinking you're doing something good because it has the veneer of working towards equity. So with that, everyone, I'm going to call it here. Thank you guys so much for joining me this morning. I hope you learned something, even in the negative space of actual details. That's kind of the point. It's not the point I want to come across, but it's the point I have to take away. If you'd like to hear more from me, I do a show every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern called TED Excellence, where we actually do use a bingo card to watch out for specific words, phrases, and other concepts that may be used in a presentation such as TEDx or other places, as you may find out. It's always fun, so join me then. And until the next Sunday stream, which will be next Sunday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, hope you guys all have a good week. I hope you all have had a good New Year's so far. Thank you so much for joining me. Everybody who donated, thank you. Thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye out on things, especially for those bots. Even though everyone here who's human is so well behaved, you have very little to do. And everyone, I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.